What's up there, YouTube viewers? This is my first video in a series on learning to program in C, uh, which I just want to sort of clarify that the purpose of this video series is going to be learning to program. And I'm using C as the language that we're programming in because it's a good first language to sort of learn because it's fairly low level. There's a lot of reasons that I'll get into later about that, but I just want to clarify, like, if you already have some experience programming, like, this tutorial series may go a little slow for you because I'm sort of envisioning in my mind that this series, the person watching this series is like real new to the whole idea of programming, really looking for a place to get started, which is great because you found the place to get started, right? So with that in mind, this first tutorial is not even going to be about programming in general, but rather just command line basics. And the reason for that is some people already know how the terminal works, but a lot of people don't, and it can be intimidating. So I just wanted to sort of go over like what I'm going to be doing in the video so that you can follow along at home and use your terminal and use your command line to do the things you need to do. So the first thing you may have noticed is that I am using a Linux distro, but this is going to be a platform independent series. So you can use a Mac, you can use a Windows machine, whatever you got. I'll tell you how to set it up, right? So the terminal that I have open here, this black box, is called the, oh, my thing died. Come on. Damn it. Oh, there it goes. All right. This is called the bash terminal. And what that stands for is the born again shell. You may be like, well, that sounds kind of weird. But what it is it's actually born like this, right? There was a guy, I'm assuming the original Unix terminal was called the Bourne shell, right? It was, I'm assuming, named after a guy named Bourne who worked on it at Bell Labs or whatever. So when they sort of revamped it, they came up with the clever name Born Again Shell, right? Because puns. So it's a very popular terminal. It's the default one for Linux, which is why I'm using it. It's also the default one for Mac. So if you have a Mac, and unfortunately I don't have a Mac instance to pull up and show you, but if you have a Mac, you can open your terminal. I'm going to link this page in the description because it looks pretty useful. It looks pretty straightforward. You can just go to your applications, utilities, and there should be a terminal button that you can click on that looks kind of like this terminal button. And then when you click it, this is going to pop up. And that's what you want. If you're on Windows, you don't have a bash terminal. You do have a terminal, but it's a command prompt like Windows, and it's a little bit different. So I will go over the differences. For what we're doing, they're very slight, so it shouldn't matter. But yeah, so here we are. We have our terminal, but that's great. What does it do? Well, a terminal is a way, it used to be the only way, but it is a way for people to interact with their computer, right? Before we had mice, and before we had GUIs, and little buttons to click on like these, people used to only have a terminal, and that was how they communicated with the computer. When they wanted to do something, they had to type it. So you're probably more familiar with GUIs nowadays, right? So like, for example, let's say I click on this GUI here, this text editor. It pops up this is just a little text editor application. I can write some stuff, and blah blah blah. These files got to be done on time. And then it's kind of like basically Notepad if you're familiar with like Windows stuff. And I'm gonna not save that because it's kind of nonsense. But I can also run that from the terminal. I don't have to click things. I don't have to click icons. If I know the name of a program, then I can type it into my terminal, and boom, same thing pops up, right? So we can run programs from our terminal. And like I said, that used to be the only way that you could run programs. And it's still a very powerful tool, so it's very in use in the tech sector as well. So it's a good thing to kind of know how to do. The more interesting thing, or the thing I'm going to sort of spend more time talking about, is that this is also our file directory system. Now, regardless of what operating system you're on, you probably have some familiarity with something that looks like this, right? Like you have different things that you can, different folders that you can click on and you can put stuff in them. I don't think there's anything in any of these because I just made this account for the purposes of this tutorial, right? But I have an example folder that I made, and you can click on stuff and go into things, right? This is also our terminal. Our terminal is also a directory system, right? And you might say, well, it doesn't look like it. It just looks like a line of text. Like, how is that the same as this? Well, all of these things, all these folders are in here. We just can't see them because it would be uneconomical to continually print them out. But we can print them out if we run a program. And just like we ran gedit to pull up that text editor, we can run a list program if we know the names of things. And the list program is ls. And if we type ls into our terminal for list, you see that it prints out all these things. And I'm not going to go through them one by one, but if you don't trust me, you can pause it and check. But each one of these names that were printed out corresponds to a folder or a file in the current directory that we are in, which is currently our home directory. So you can see that we're doing the same thing. We're in the same place here as we are here. It's just not a graphical user interface. But there are more things you can do than just look at pretty files, right? Like, for example, I moved into the example folder by double clicking on it, and I have a second folder and I have an example text. But I can move into my example folder in the command line as well. And that's called changing my directory. Let's see if I can write that. Change directory. That's beautiful. And there's a program that somebody wrote, right? That's called change directory, and the word for it is cd. But we can't just tell our terminal, hey, change directory please, because they might not know where we're trying to change our directory to. So we have to hit space, as I did, and then type the name of the directory that we want to change into, in this case, example folder. Now, this is an important thing to take note of, because this is called a command line argument, right? Change directory, cd is our program. We have a space, and then we have a command line argument that we're passing to our program. In this case, the name of the folder that we want to change into. And the reason that's going to come up is because later in the series, we're going to be writing our own programs that take their own command line arguments. So you can see sort of that all we're doing is the same thing that other people have done. So we're like real programmers, right? That's kind of cool. So I'm going to change my directory into example folder, and you can see now that I have this / example folder. And this stuff right here is kind of weird. That's because it's Ubuntu. But if I type pwd, that stands for present working directory. present working directory. That's not super important, but you can see that I'm home void star, that's my user account, and then I'm in example folder. So it's giving me my path directory to where I currently am. And it's kind of close to here. They're leaving out my username, but that's okay. It's essentially the same, right? So again, if I list out the contents of my new folder, I have an example text and I have a second folder. So that's my example text and that's my second folder, and they're in there. And I can move to the second folder, right? And there's I put something in there too. But now I'm all the way down in here, right? And I have an inner text, and that's great. But what if I want to go back to my example folder, right? Like in this one, I have a back. I can just click this, or I can click the back arrow, and it'll take me back up. But we don't have any back arrows in our terminal. So what do? Well, we can still use change directory, but now we're going to hit dot dot. And dot dot is a special argument that just tells the change directory program I want to go back up one subfolder, right? So I do that, and now I'm back in example folders. And you might say, well, why didn't you just type the name of it again? Well, you can't do that either, because let's say I want to go into documents, and there's nothing in documents, but let's say I wanted to go create something in documents. Well, I can't go there from here. If I put in documents, it says, dude, I don't know what that is. And that's because the terminal only can see what's in its own present working directory. So if I want to go to documents from my example folder, I have to go back up one and then into documents, right? Because I have to go back to my home directory and then into my documents directory. And I can do that in one command if I say change directory dot dot to go back up one, and then I put a slash, and then I put documents. See? And there's nothing in documents. And when there's nothing in a folder, it doesn't print anything out because there's nothing in there. But I went up one, and then I went down into documents. And I did that all in one line without having to hit back and then double clicking. So that's kind of cool. So as long as you know the path, you can get there from anywhere, but you can only get places that are directly below you, if that makes sense. So that's the list command to see what you have in your directory, the change directory command to change your directory. But there's one other thing we might want to do, right? We might want to make a new directory, like create a new folder. Well, how do I create a new folder in the terminal? Well, there's a new command called make directory. Spelled it wrong. Make directory. And make directory stands for mkdir, stands for make directory, and you have to pass it another command line argument, obviously, because you have to give it the name of the folder you want to create. So in this case, I'm going to use tutorials, possibly, because this is going to be the folder I'm going to keep all my tutorial code in that I'm going to make in this video series. So now when I put it in documents, though, that's not where I wanted it. So when I make a tutorials folder, you can see that it shows up in my directory now. I have a new thing, and you can see that it showed up here too, right? Like, because these are pointing to the same place, so it makes sense that it's there. So we're going to go into tutorials, and of course tutorials is empty because I just made it, and this is where we're going to put all our code, starting in the next series where I start to talk about some codes. But now you know how to list elements in a directory, change around in your directories, make new directories, and that is applicable for Linux and Macs. If you have Windows, most of that is the same. And I'm just going to pull this up real quick. This is a Windows terminal. And to get to your Windows terminal, it's kind of the same deal, right? You're going to go to your start menu, and if you type in command, if you type in CMD, a little black box picture like this will pop up, and you can click on it. And it looks similar, right? If you look at the two, you can see that they look kind of the same. This one has the D drive, and I'm in my examples folder. And the main difference is that instead of change directory being CD, or no, instead of list directory contents being LS, just the dir stands for directory, and that's going to be your list directory. And you can see that there's nothing in my examples folder, right? But I can still use change directory the same way. And now I'm back up to my D drive, and I can print out all the things that are in there, and then I can change directory back into my example, and then I can make a new directory, example 2, and then when I print this out, now I have an example 2 inside of my example, and I can change into that example 2, and now I'm in example slash example 2, which is awesome folder name. And so that wraps up this video. It went pretty long here, but I think that with this sort of basic understanding of what it is that a terminal is and what it does, it should be a little less intimidating for people who aren't familiar with it. So in the next video, I'm going to go over actually using a text editor to write some code, and so that should be fun. Stay tuned.